Hello, and welcome to Otterbein Debates. I'm Susan Millsap, Professor of Communication here at Otterbein University, and tonight we will be discussing the issue of whether students should be required to take a foreign language class in order to earn their degree. Tonight, arguing that students should not be required is Alina Carpenter, who is a senior English major, and arguing that yes, you should be required to take a foreign language is Luz Labra, who is a freshman political science major. Our judges for this evening are Dr. Jim Gorman in the English department, Dr. Hillary Warren from Journalism and Media Communication, and Carrie Strayer from the Communication department. Our student judges are Haley Schmall, a sophomore Public Relations and Communication Studies major, and Justin Henry, a senior Allied Health major. Both debaters will get a 6-minute constructive speech where they will present their main argument. After each constructive speech, they are allowed 2 minutes to ask the other debater questions. They will then each have a 3-minute rebuttal speech, and then Alina will get a 2-minute summary speech at the end. I will be keeping time. Is everybody ready? Let's begin.
Foreign language classrooms. In the Edgar Journal of English Studies, school translation is described as the writing of text following lexical and syntactic choices induced by the source language text, as opposed to professional translation, which is aimed at a reader who is fundamentally interested in the contents of the text. Pedagogical translations are aimed at measuring a student's knowledge of the language and not whether the application is realistic. In the same article, Vermees points out that related to this is another difference, which is in that foreign language acquisition, many texts tend to be isolated fragments because they are used to check student mastery of specific features, vocabulary, syntax, etc., whereas text and translation classes are coherent run-on texts, just as in real translation. Students, therefore, are not learning a realistic application of foreign language. They are learning the language of a textbook simply to fit the needs of a school requirement. B. The critical period for students to learn a foreign language is before puberty. Though it may be difficult to notice, most college students have already gone through puberty and have therefore surpassed this critical neurological period for acquiring a second language. In Theory and Practice in Language Studies, Roo-Yeon Hu discusses lateralization of the brain and how it relates to second language acquisition. Lenneberg used the term lateralization to express that puberty means a period of time when the localization of language processing ability in a person's left hemisphere was connected with their biological change or development. That means, in language learning, children's brains are more flexible than that of adults. Other linguists have even theorized that lateralization can occur as early as 5 years of age, in which case a college course has come 13 years too late. Though studies have shown that adults are able to acquire a second language faster than children, children are ultimately better at obtaining the correct pronunciations of the second language, as well as retaining overall knowledge of the language. Who says that, in addition, there is another statement which can be cited, that the importance of memory in young learners and of analytic abilities in older learners has been observed as the differences. While it's not impossible for college students to learn a foreign language, it's ideal for students to learn a second language at an earlier age. C. Formal instruction in a foreign language is not necessary. In a study done by the University of Amsterdam, researchers found that children who were not fluent in Dutch needed only 1 year of exposure to the language to become proficient in it. The children were tested on sentence judgment, sentence translation, sentence repetition, storytelling, story comprehension, morphology, pronunciation, and auditory discrimination. The ages of the children studied ranged from 3 years of age to 15 years of age. After being tested in these various areas, researchers found that the older children actually scored higher on these exams than younger children did, despite having had no formal instruction in the language. In all cases, the age differences favored the older subjects over the younger ones. For all tests except pronunciation, the order of the groups, from proficient to poor, was 12 to 15, adult, 8 to 10, 6 to 7, and 3 to 5. Spontaneous pronunciation showed a linear increase with age. These results would indicate that older children do not need formal instruction in a second language, as exposure to the language in and of itself is sufficient for older children to learn. D. Conclusion. While foreign language education is helpful to students at an early age, by the time a student reaches college, they are past their prime years for acquiring a second language. Formal instruction may be helpful in learning a language, but for students whose studies are not focused on foreign language, being required to take those courses is only a burdensome and fruitless endeavor. Neurologically speaking, it is not likely for students who have not had foreign language education during their formative years to retain the knowledge of a second language. Older students have also proven to be able to acquire a second language without any formal training. Thus, mandating these classes is pointless when a student can acquire proficiency in a language without them. Though universities may want their students to have knowledge in many different areas of study, they also need to have faith in their students' capabilities to learn outside of the classroom. Thank you.
So you're saying just because something's hard, we shouldn't do it?
No, I'm saying that it's too hard for college. It's harder for college students to learn these languages, and it's also not going to make them bilingual. So therefore, it's not going to do them any good if it doesn't have anything to do with their major.
Is it impossible to learn another language while in college?
It's not impossible, but it's harder, and it's also been shown that they don't actually need to have this formal instruction. They can just learn it just by being exposed to it.
And you agree that learning a second language increases the brain function, right?
No, I didn't say I agreed with it.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Hola, buenas noches. Who wouldn't want to understand, hold on, sorry. Who wouldn't want the chance to be able to fight diseases, communicate with thousands of people, and make more money? Everyone, right? By being bilingual, you can have that. 1, it increases brain function. By being bilingual or learning another language, you can increase the brain function. Being bilingual alters the brain, making a person more attentive, increases in the ability to concentrate and have more control, according to brainfacts.org. Since being able to speak another language, Since being able to speak another language other than the native one to a person, the person can delay onset Alzheimer's disease and might protect against dementia. Those are 2 very serious diseases that can be delayed in a few years by just being able to speak another language. Finally, by speaking more than one language, it strengthens the brain and improves memory. The brain strengthens more if a person started to learn that language by an early age. 2, it increases communication. In the United States, only 21% of the population speaks another language other than English, which means that 79% only speak English. In the world, 40% can speak one language, and 56% of the world can speak at least 2 languages, according to languages.org. In Europe, most all students are studying a second language. In at least 20 different countries, it's mandatory to learn another language. Why? Because it's necessary and a useful skill. The United States does not require students to study a foreign language, which is why they ranked 14 out of 40 in schools in education, according to pewresearch.org. By being able to speak another language, you're able to speak to 50% more people than by only being able to speak one language. Another communication barrier would be with refugees coming into the country. The vast majority of refugees come from Syria, according to UN Refugee Agency. And the situation that Syria is in right now, they do not have the ability or resources to learn another language, let alone get their basic educational needs. While refugees enter the country, communication is an issue because they speak Arabic and we speak English. By being able to break this barrier, learning another language would help us understand what they're going through and how they act, and have an actual conversation with them. Imagine how many people we can help and understand by just learning another language. In an article written by Lennox Morrison, a multi-international company had a huge financial loss. Why? Well, because of one simple word that was miscommunicated between a native English speaker and a colleague whose second language was English. The native speaker sent out an email to his colleague, and the colleague was unsure of the certain word. In his dictionary, there were 2 different meanings of that word, and he took the wrong meaning for it. That simple word triggered a huge financial loss to the company. Native English speakers use English differently than people who learn it because of cultural differences and because of slang that's used by native speakers. In business and in politics, English is a common language learned to speak, which means people from other countries have to learn English. There is another issue that native speakers are not good at tuning into language variations because they only speak one language and are not required to learn another. 3rd, college requirement. Elite schools like Clarion, Georgia Tech, MIT, Stanford, UCLA, and Harvard all require at least 2 or more years of foreign language to be admitted to their school. While admitted to a university or colleges, most schools require a foreign language credit to graduate. According to the University of California, the average cost of a foreign language is $480 to $550 a year. In many colleges throughout the United States, they offer many different languages available for students like Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Latin, Spanish, Italian, and Japanese. Those $480 to pay for a class is just a small investment in yourself. Being bilingual or knowing another language increases the pay in the workforce. Employers are looking for people who are able to speak more than one language. On average, a person who is fluent with at least 2 languages makes about 18% more than a person who only speaks one, according to Salary.com. In Daly City, California, an administrative assistant makes $47,976 in a year, and in the same city, a person who's bilingual makes $53,544 a year. That's $5,568 more dollars a year by being able to speak another language. Being able to speak another language is important for businesses. Students are paying tuition to be a well-rounded student, so they require foreign language. Even though at the moment you may not think that it's important, later in life you'll realize that it is.
Could you repeat your statistic on the academic performance in the U.S. versus in other countries? Was that just for knowing other languages, or was it academic performance in general?
In general.
So if it was just academic performance in general, what does it have to do with them learning other languages?
Well, other countries, they learn more than one language, which means that they're more attentive in their school, which means they pay attention more.
Is that because they learn other languages?
No, but in the United States, it's gone down ranking in all subjects.
Because we don't know foreign languages?
No.
Okay. And then you also talk about how the benefits of learning a language at a young age can protect against Alzheimer's and give you stronger brain function. What is the specific age? Because if you're learning it in college, that doesn't sound like a young enough age to be able to get these benefits that you talk about.
There wasn't a specific age group. It was just in general, if you're able to speak another language, it decreases your chances of getting Alzheimer's and it delays dementia.
Okay. And so say you're a non-major, you're only required to take maybe 1 semester or 2 semesters of a language. Is that going to be enough to make you bilingual and get all of these benefits that you talk about, like a higher pay and higher brain function and all of these things? Like, are you going to be bilingual after 1 semester of a foreign language class?
You probably won't be, but if you learned it in high school, it's easier.
So if you went to a job and applied for the job, would you get these benefits? If you said, oh, I only had 1 semester and I'm not bilingual, but I'd like a higher pay, would you get those?
It depends on how much you're able to speak it.
Okay, that's it. So while I'm not denying the benefits that Luce has talked about when it comes to learning a foreign language, the reality is that if you're not majoring in a foreign language, then you're only required to take 1 to 2 semesters of a foreign language to fulfill the requirements for your degree. And in that time, it's not possible for you to become bilingual, which she's already admitted to. It's not possible for you to become bilingual and learn these things in 1 to 2 semesters of college. So it doesn't make sense to have to spend money on a class that is not going to be relevant to your major and is not going to help you further your career and increase your prospects after graduation. Especially if you're only taking 1 semester, you can't go and to apply for a job and say, well, I'm not bilingual, but I took a semester of Spanish in college, so I'd like a higher salary like someone who is bilingual, because you're not bilingual, so you're not going to get those benefits. And you only get these benefits that she talks about, like higher brain function and prevention against Alzheimer's and dementia, if you're taking it at a younger age. But college isn't a young enough age to learn it. You're already not going to do as well in a class as a younger student would after puberty, and that's what these studies that I talk about have shown, that that it's harder for people to learn another language and acquire the vocabulary and the pronunciation and everything that has to do with that language in 1 semester, especially if you're already of college age. Is not going to help you enough, and you're probably not even going to retain it. So it's not fair for us to try and to have to be made to take these classes when it's not going to benefit us. It's not going to benefit us neurologically the way she's talking about. We're probably not going to get a pay raise out of taking 1 to 2 semesters of a different language. And it's also not going to help us actually learn enough of the language that we need to be bilingual. So we need to take the time that we would have spent learning a language that has nothing to do with our major and apply it to something that will help us with our careers and invest in something that's going to benefit us in the future. Thank you.
When you fill out a college application, you usually have to say whether or not you took a few years of a language in high school. So, like elite schools like Clariton, Georgia Tech, MIT, Stanford, UCLA, and Harvard all require at least 2 or more years. I know Harvard requires at least 4 years of another language. So by it being required in college, you already know the language enough, so by the time you're out of college, you're able to have that college credit and get a pay raise in your job. It increases the brain function at any age. It strengthens more at a younger age, but even if you start learning another language in college, you're able to get those benefits like delay on onset dementia and Alzheimer's disease. In a semester in college, you can learn at least the basics of another language. So for refugees, you're able to at least say hi to them and act friendly to them instead of completely ignoring them and seem rude. Also, the minority in the United States is becoming a majority, like Hispanics. So Spanish is all around the United States right now, and 21% of those people aren't able to speak to Hispanic-speaking people. That's it. That's all I have.
Okay. So, in conclusion, we need to stop mandating the foreign language requirement in colleges because it's already been shown that taking foreign language classes after puberty makes it harder for people to retain this knowledge, and they're not going to pick up on it as quickly as they would at a younger age. If we really want kids to learn this, then we should require it in elementary school, not in college. And if you want to know it enough to be able to talk with other people and converse with them, like to be able to say basic phrases like, hi, how are you? You don't need an entire semester of college and to spend $480 to $550 per year on this major, on something that's not for your major. You can just learn that, study, like in the research at University of Amsterdam, it shows that you can learn all these things just from being exposed to them. You don't need formal instruction with them. And even older people don't do as well with the formal instruction. They do better by being exposed to it. It's the younger kids that need the formal instruction, and then they can learn the language. But we are not going to become bilingual, and we're not going to get these benefits from 1 to 2 semesters of college. And so what we need to actually benefit our career is classes in our major that are actually going to help us with what we want to do, not a class in a foreign language that we're not going to speak again. We need to be learning more about the things that we want to do after we graduate, as opposed to being in debt from having to take classes that you don't need and knowing just a few general phrases but not being able to speak the entire language. Thank you.
Thank you to our debaters. Appreciate their insight on this issue. I also want to thank Otterbein TV for always covering these Otterbein debates, as well as WOBN for covering this live as well. And so now, judges, I would ask you to hold up cards that represent how you are voting on this subject. whether or not students should be required to take a foreign language or not. So should they be required, your card would say yes, they should be required. If you say they should not be required, then the card you would hold up is no. So based on the debate that you just heard, yes. Judges? No. And we have a 4-1 vote, no requirement. So, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Otterbein debate, which will be held in March, on the subject of whether students should be allowed pets in their dorm rooms. See you then.